Welcome to a very special episode of ET with GOTB. I'd like to think we've got our guest decision absolutely spot on this week, Soph. We are joined by PGMOL referee Mel Burgin. I'm Rachel.
I'm Sophie.
And this is Extra Time with Girls on the Ball. Welcome to the podcast, Mel. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you after this weekend? We were both at Villa Park, weren't we? There's plenty of action for you to oversee.
Yeah, plenty of goals this weekend in the Villa City game. Yeah, no, all good, all recovered. Moving on to this week's preparations. But yeah, all good.
Well, it is great to have you on the pod. A great opportunity to kind of delve a bit more into your journey, but also the journey of referees as well. So maybe give our listeners a little bit of an insight into how you got into refereeing firstly.
Yeah, of course. So I grew up playing football, huge football fan, as I'm sure we all are. So I grew up with a brother. So naturally there was a competitive streak there. It was kind of back in the days when, there weren't really many girls teams around. So I started playing within a boys team when I was about 8 years old. From there, I set up my own little team. So rallied around all my friends at school and we managed to pull together a girls team. We played for a few years. I then went on to playing at Sheffield United Academy from I think I was about 12, 13 years old. It was only when I got to about the age of 14 that my brother started doing a paper round and I was really jealous that he was earning a little bit of pocket money and I wasn't. I was playing on a Saturday morning, so we used to travel all around and play on a Saturday, so there was no way of getting a Saturday job like he did and like a lot of my friends did. And my mum suggested doing the referee course, so I went on the course, started refereeing my little brother's team. He wasn't best impressed, as you can imagine. And it got to the age of 15, 16, I got released from the academy. I was a bit kind of, I suppose, lost in what I wanted to do. I'd obviously only known playing. I suppose I hadn't started off when I did the refereeing course thinking, great, I want to be a referee when I'm older. I was still very much enjoying playing, and refereeing was kind of a bit of a pocket money earner still at that stage. Had a little bit of a think, and I kind of thought, right, I'll give this a go. I got a little bit of information from my local county FA in terms of how you progress through the refereeing system. And I kind of just went full throttle at it. Fortunately, my parents, kind of supported me. They'd be driving my brother to games. One would be driving my brother. One would be driving me to referee, wherever it was. And I started progressing through the system that way. So started, I think, when I was 16, refereed my first men's game, which was an experience, as you can imagine. But I absolutely loved it. I loved the challenge. And I suppose I just got the refereeing bug from there. Loved the challenge of, always developing to get better, progressing through the system. And that's kind of how I initially then got into refereeing and that pathway as such. I then went through and progressed to be an assistant referee. So I used to be a FIFA assistant referee. So I spent 4 years on the list, travelling around Europe, various competitions, Champions League, Euro qualifiers, and 17s, 19s tournaments. And it was only year and a half ago that I transitioned over to being a referee, something that I always knew, I suppose, deep down that I wanted to do. You dual as an assistant referee and a referee up until a certain level, obviously here in kind of England. So I was still dualing across both, so I still had that option. And I don't know, there was just something in me that always wants to be a referee. There's obviously similar skills to being an assistant referee and a referee, but there's also some varying ones. And I just felt like my personality was kind of more suited to that of a referee. So I converted over, came off the assistant referee list, and then I've spent a year off the list and I've just been renominated onto the list as a referee for 2025. So really, really cool. I'm off to Athens this weekend for my UEFA intro course. So yeah, really cool, really, really excited. And a new challenge, a new journey to get stuck into as part of my refereeing career.
Cool.
Congratulations on that. You said you started at 16. That must have been pretty daunting, that first game. Can you remember what it was like?
Yes. So obviously I was very nervous. I think it goes without saying. I knew you were kind of stepping into that open age football. And I think it was a veterans game So to be fair, it all went well. The players looked after me. I think they recognised that I was a younger referee, and they looked after me. And I refereed on that league for a couple of years and really learnt a lot in that time. It was a great environment, I suppose, to learn, develop, and especially as we moved into that open age group, it was a really nice start to that open age football experience.
What's the process like, the training? I mean, I got to spend a weekend with PGMOL. I was shooting your training weekend, so I kind of got to see a lot of different areas of it, and I've spoken about it in various media I've done and stuff. I found it really interesting, but maybe give our listeners a little bit of what that looks like.
Yeah, so the training kind of varies week on week. So we do all have a group of sports scientists. So the sports scientists are programmers in terms of actual training, physical training, day to day. So we receive a program of that. We obviously attend camps regularly, as you've experienced. Be 2 days worth of kind of seminars, fitness sessions, gym-based sessions, all with content that will help us develop maybe key topics that are relevant in the game at that stage. And we'll watch a lot of clips, analyse kind of that side of it. So yeah, those camps do provide an opportunity for us all to get together, learn from one another as well, which I think is really important. And then, yeah, obviously the physical training and that side of it is something that kind of week to week we kind of focus on. We log all our data. So yeah, it's kind of varied, I think.
It's obviously training both outside and in the classroom, but you're also learning how to use new technologies that are coming into the game. You were doing with a VAR session with Rachel when she joined you. So how has that kind of evolved in your time as a ref?
Yeah, of course. So we're always developing to make sure that we're up to date with the latest technologies, trends. We've gone through the process of training for VAR so that we are prepared for if any technology comes into the game or there's any advances within that area. But that process has varied. There's been a lot of classroom-based sessions, online modules, and of course been out on the pitch or also in the hub, so kind of sat in the chair. So we've experienced it from all different angles so that if that does come in at any point in the future, we are best prepped to obviously deliver that.
Yeah, I was really impressed with the setup in Loughborough. So not just the classroom stuff, but like outside I remember the weather was horrendous for a bit of it, but they had a tent set up, they had loads of cameras. It was very cool to see the way they facilitate real in-game moments for you to practice. So like even stuff like sending you off to do kind of sprints and stuff, and then have to come back and look at a piece of footage and make a decision like when you're out of breath and stuff like that you just don't really think about. Or we don't.
Yeah, no, of course, I completely get that. I suppose players will play football all week. They're practicing what they're going to do at the weekend. Our training, it's important that we adapt that so that there is that element of decision making included within that. So, making a decision after a maximal sprint is something that we would do in a game. And I think it's really important that we replicate that in training as well to really create, as realistic a environment as possible as we'd experience on match day. So I think it's really important that we have that exposure to that kind of training.
So I remember, I think Sky Sports did a special on refereeing, and we could hear, kind of what you were saying to each other, what the refs were saying to each other throughout a game. And it gave us a really good insight as people who aren't involved in refereeing regularly or don't really know what goes on, to see how the whole process kind of works. And see how you're all kind of as a team involved in the match and talking to each other, not just the person in the middle. So would you like to see more of that kind of analysis coming up?
Yeah, I think it's really useful in kind of opening up how we operate as referees. I think from the outside looking in, you probably wouldn't even think about what we're all saying to each other and communicating. And the aim of that is that we reach the correct outcome on field. So I think it's positive in the sense that it's opened up that perception and that viewpoint. The communication that takes place on field, its sole purpose is to achieve the correct outcome between the whole team. I think it's really important that we have that dialogue because ultimately we just want to make the correct decision at the end of the day for the game. So yeah, I think it can be positive. It really highlights kind of what we analyse as well, and I think it just gives a different perception to a football fan, so to speak.
Wasn't it the FA Cup final where there was an offside decision within like the first 90 seconds or something, and they released that footage of the decision because it was the correct decision, and I think it went to VAR, didn't it? Potentially did it. I can't remember what the situation in the FA Cup didn't, but I just remember that them releasing how everyone communicated to each other, and it was actually quite wholesome because it was like, well done, great job, like great decision, and it was really nice to see because the decision was correct. And my God, to have to do that in Wembley within like 90 seconds of an FA Cup final starting, and it was quite a cool thing to release and to see.
Joe, you got to be switched on from the first minute, doesn't it? That's a perfect example, actually. Yeah, so it was a goal, wasn't it? So the goals have all checked on VAR. So, yeah, I think it really does highlight, naturally, there'll be decisions in the game where it's kind of a jigsaw situation. So might be an offside situation and there may be a need for some input from the referee or from maybe the inactive assistant as well, to determine, as an example, whether it was impact or not by the player that was in the offside position. And so I think it's really important that that kind of process happens. There's different processes for different situations in terms of on comms, and naturally everyone's a little bit different, but everyone will follow a similar process to achieve those correct outcomes.
Yeah, it was cool.
I think it's very cool from, I guess, the outsider's point of view to really understand how that works as well. It just gives a bit more insight. In terms of your career so far and your milestones, what's been your biggest memory or highlight?
Oh, I think the biggest highlight would be 2019. I was assistant referee on the Women's FA Cup final. First time at Wembley. Amazing. Just walking out to that atmosphere. And I remember a colleague of mine was like, you need to really take it in before the game because the moment just goes. And I don't remember much from the game at all. It was Man City v West Ham. But I do remember the moment of walking out at Wembley, taking everything in, the national anthem. So yeah, really special moment. First time at Wembley. And I think, that's a pinnacle to any match official's career to walk out at Wembley, the FA Cup final. Absolutely amazing. So yeah, that's definitely a standout moment today, yeah.
Did you have anyone in the crowd for you at the game?
So I had all my family there, which is pretty special. So yeah, really, really cool. My family have supported me, so have my friends throughout my refereeing career. So yeah, very special to be able to have them there on that day as well and let them experience, the whole day and weekend as well. So really special.
Yeah. Love that. Do you have a dream fixture that you would like to referee?
I would love to referee the FA Cup final, but I'd also love to go to a major tournament. So not a specific fixture, but I'd love to referee any game at a major tournament. Would be pretty amazing. Yeah.
It'd be very cool. I remember you mentioned earlier about, being on the sort of international circuit and travelling around, but also being able to do the youth tournaments and everything. How important was that kind of in kind of your development, getting to go and do those kind of major tournaments, so that hopefully when you do get to a major tournament in the future, that kind of preparation is there?
I think it's fantastic. I suppose there's a real uniqueness in the sense that I've kind of been and had those experiences as an assistant referee, so I kind of know what to expect. I learnt so much. We work at a lot of the youth tournaments. You work with colleagues from other countries as well, so you're not just within the team, like an English team of match officials, and that in itself is a fantastic experience. You're working with other colleagues from all over Europe, and you get that experience to learn from one another and share those experiences, and I think that can only be beneficial in taking that forward. I also like to think that I kind of have experience as an assistant referee as well, kind of the whole experience. And I'd like to think that brings a different outlook in terms of how I manage the team on match day and so on. So I know what the assistant referees are expecting as an example in terms of comms, because I've been there. I think it brings a really unique aspect. And it's been fantastic in my development as a referee, and especially in terms of that comms piece and the teamwork piece. And hopefully that continues moving forward as we kind of progress and move on to the international stage as a referee.
You said that you'd been added to the FIFA international list of referees for 2025. Tell our listeners what that means. Is that a bit like, waiting to know if you've been called up to your national team? Is it that kind of vibe?
Very much the same. You've hit the nail on the head, actually. Yeah, so we have so many spots for referees and assistant referees internationally. And what that essentially means is you'll go away and represent your country on the international stage as a referee. Very similar to getting a call up for your national team, essentially. And that involves obviously like an introductory course, which I've obviously mentioned I'm going on this weekend in Athens. And then from there, once you've gone through all of that course on the training aspects and past fitness tests and laws of the game, you're then appointed to games internationally. And there's also like a progression as well on the international stage. There's different levels, a little bit similar to domestic refereeing in England. So you progress through the different levels. And once you're in elite, then you potentially go to major tournaments and so on.
That's cool. We keep an eye out, don't we? Like when we were at the Dominican Republic at the under-17s, we were like, oh, there's Abby, we know her.
She looks really familiar.
What do you think are the main differences between refereeing domestically and then internationally?
I think just the expectations are different, naturally. Varying expectations, and I think that's something that we obviously adapt to when we go internationally versus domestically. And that's just something that we're conscious of to make sure that we're obviously refereeing and giving decisions that are expected of the game in that environment. So that's probably the main difference, I would say.
If there was one thing you wanted our listeners to take away in terms of knowing about refereeing, what would it be?
Oof.
One thing.
One thing, that we're human, that we love the game just as much as probably other listeners. We're all football fans. And it's a fantastic career. So if you're not already, go and sign up and become a referee.
That was something I took away actually from that weekend I spent, was hearing some of you talking about some of the referees who are still working in other jobs and the lengths they go to in order to referee. And it felt really reminiscent of when we started Girls on the Ball and like doing the full-time job and doing all the extras, a second job essentially just because you love it so much. And that was really nice to see.
Yeah, 100%. There are, there's some of the girls now that are on professional contracts, but for a lot of the officials, a lot of people are balancing jobs alongside this. I suppose initially it starts off as a hobby, but as time's progressed and now we're within the women's professional game, it's something that everyone takes professionally. We're professional in our approach, in how we prepare for games. But of course, some people are juggling jobs alongside that and families as well. So, we do it for the absolute love of the game. We are football fans. We love it and we love what we do. So,
yeah. Just a nice thing for people to remember. Right, we do have a couple of questions from our followers. There was an interesting, actually, this one kind of came up a little bit. There was a theme, and it was a bit about dealing with either self-doubt or dealing with the noise, because while football fans of opposing teams might not like each other, unfortunately, they can all get behind blaming the ref for things. So how do you deal with that?
Yeah, so as part of what we do, we'll analyse our own performances. So we will go away after every game and watch 90 minutes of football back. We'll listen to the comms as well, and we'll kind of review our processes, what we did well and what we didn't do well. And I think we can become lost in, looking at the developments, which is great because we're always striving to get better. But I think it's really, really important that we also kind of focus in on those strengths, so what we do well. And I think in terms of managing that self-doubt, really highlighting those strengths and making sure that we're doing that as part of that process is really, really useful. I'd say that's kind of the main thing in terms of also focusing on the strengths. There's always learning that can be done. No game is ever delivered perfect. There's always something that we can pick up on in terms of development. So, just definitely focusing on those strengths and using them to kind of build that self-confidence back up.
Is that something that's increased as the game has grown in terms of the women's side of the game as well? And is it something that PGMOL help you with?
Yeah, of course. So we have a dedicated team of sports psychologists. So we have access to those. So if anyone ever needs support, they have the opportunity to reach out. We also do have our own coaches as well. So everyone can also reach out to their coaches. Naturally, their advice is kind of more technical refereeing, but they also do act as mentors to us as well and do offer that level of support if anyone does need that. So there's definitely a growing support network around us to enable us to kind of overcome some of these challenges, because naturally the game is growing. brings with it more exposure, more fans, more scrutiny. So yeah, those support services are in place. I think it's really important that we've got access to those as it continues to grow.
Yeah, definitely. Something I was going to ask you earlier on, this isn't from one of the listeners, but I do remember when refs didn't have all the comms and all the mics up stuff, and I just wonder, does that help you zone in, like in terms of, because I know players say they don't often hear the noise in the crowd, but if you've got comms in your ear, does it really help you to just zone in on the game and kind of block all that out?
100%. In all honesty, I don't hear what happens outside when the comms are in. The main focus is obviously what the team are saying to each other and reaching the correct outcome in terms of the decisions. So it really does block out the noise. And I suppose we're just so focused and so in that zone that we're not kind of thinking about what someone's saying behind us. It really is about communicating with the team, following those processes on the comms, that we just don't really hear that outside noise, which I think is a positive.
Mm. What's the most enjoyable part of your career?
Most enjoyable? Lots of things. As I've said, we really do love, what we do. And I think it's important to highlight. We have the best seat in the house. When I used to play, that adrenaline that you get when you're playing football and you're going out to play, I get that as a referee, which I think is fantastic. So for me, it's the next best thing to playing. Been best seat in the house, running around, the fantastic opportunities that are there now. And that ongoing challenge to become better and improve. I love that challenge of, developing, analysing, and then moving on week to try and improve that. So that ongoing challenge to try and become better is also what I love about refereeing, yeah.
This is a bit of a left field one. But someone wants to know if you're allowed to wear long tracksuit bottoms if it's cold. What are the kit rules for you guys?
I wish we could wear long tracksuit bottoms if it was cold. We obviously have our kit decided for us in the WSL, so what colour we're wearing based on what the teams are wearing. Personal preference. I'll always be in short sleeves. I'll never wear long sleeves. Personal.
Oh wow! Are you allowed to wear gloves?
Hardy.
I don't wear gloves. You can wear gloves.
You can, okay, but you're too hard. Okay,
not optional. I'm a northerner.
Yes. Stupid question. Have you ever had an I've made a mistake moment? And what do you do in that? Obviously, you don't have to give us specifics of the match, but is it much like a player who's missed a sitter? Do you kind of just have to try and put it out of your mind until the end of the game, where you'll probably overanalyze, I imagine?
Yeah, absolutely. There's certain decisions that you'll make and you just know instantly based on the reaction of the players. You get that awful gut feeling and you know that you've made a mistake. Ultimately, you've made that decision based on the information that you had, and when you've given it, you think it's the correct outcome. But sometimes you just get a little bit of an inkling that something's not quite right. And, that could happen in minute 1 and you've got another 89 minutes to go. Everyone will have different methods of how they cope with that. For me, I'll just kind of speak to myself and tell myself to switch off from it and move on to the next decision. Everyone will be different, but that kind of helps me. I just kind of, speak to myself and tell myself to move on to the next decision. Ultimately, decision may be wrong. You don't want to get 89 minutes worth of decisions wrong as a result. So I think it's really important that you just kind of develop a process that works for you, and you utilise that. As soon as the game's finished, you've got plenty of time to analyse that and look at potentially where it may have gone wrong. But in that moment, it's really important that you switch off and move on to get the next decision correct.
Sure. And finally, if you could change one rule in the game, what would it be?
One rule. I don't know. I really don't know on one rule. I don't know. It's a controversial question, that. What would be yours?
I think a yellow for taking your shirt off. I always get annoyed.
What, you don't want to see a yellow card take your shirt off?
That would be my one.
Imagine how long the celebrations would go on if there was no yellow cards.
Well, we could put a time limit on it. I can't remember which player it was who said it, might have been Viv Miedema actually, rolling subs to allow for a bit more of a, managing injuries or properly. You know the way they do in like rugby, where if it's a head injury, they can go off and get properly assessed and be allowed to come back on, which was interesting. And I think she was talking about in terms of managing loading, but that was an interesting one. I don't know.
I guess that's an interesting one, because if you do have proper like concussion assessments, it doesn't rule you out for the whole game. Whereas if you have to come off, yeah, I think that was an interesting one when it comes to that. I think it's difficult. I would love, and this is controversial, the way rugby stops the clock. So I quite like that, because it kind of cuts out time wasting and stuff like that, I think, a little bit, because the clock is literally, when the game's in play, the clock is going, and it makes it a lot easier, I guess, for you guys to figure out how much added time goes on and all that kind of stuff. So I quite like that. Yeah,
it's an interesting concept, isn't it? Because I think, was there like an analysis of how long the balls stayed in play recently, in recent years? And it's obviously nowhere near 90 minutes. It's an interesting concept. I don't know how long the games would go on, but it's an interesting concept.
Yeah, be an interesting one. I don't know. I think a lot of people will say don't change the rules, the game's fine as it is, but there's always little tweaks here and there, isn't there? Anyway, thank you so much for joining us. It's been really interesting. Great to hear a bit more about you, your journey, and more broadly, I guess, refereeing as well. I'm sure our listeners will enjoy hearing it. Where are you this weekend?
I am off to Athens on Saturday, so I'm not WSL this weekend. Yeah, so I've got a game tonight. Game tonight, and then Saturday fly out. So yeah.
Do you get to enjoy any of Athens, or is it just all training?
I think we'll be in the course for the whole few days. Yeah.
Oh, that's a shame. Maybe am I supposed to go?
Yeah, maybe next time.
Well, good luck with that. We might see you on the international stage. Hopefully, maybe we get to see you at a Euros match or something this summer. I'll have our fingers crossed that you get the call up.
No, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.